Can you outline for our viewers what is at stake in this New Hampshire primary? It's the first primary of the season in this election cycle. What is at stake both for Nikki Haley and for Donald Trump?
Well, look, this is a significant race here in New Hampshire. This is meant to kick off the nominating process for the GOP nominee for the presidential election. So whatever happens here tonight is going to be significant. But we have a two-person race, and that's a little bit of a surprise. Usually this early in the process, we have several more candidates that are trying to win an election, but now it's down to former President Donald Trump and his former UN ambassador Nikki Haley. The former South Carolina governor has been making the case to New Hampshire voters here, trying to cast herself as a clean break from the Trump era. She says she will bring generational change to the Republican Party, but it's not clear if that argument is going to be good enough for voters here in New Hampshire. Most polls have Trump comfortably in the lead. Trump has been making the argument that this race is pretty much over. He has gotten several endorsements from former challengers, and he has already set his sights on South Carolina. That's the next big primary contest in this process. So all of this may be over a lot sooner than we had expected if Trump is able to win New Hampshire tonight. It's going to be really hard for Nikki Haley to continue making the argument that she can stay in the race.
And why is she betting so much on New Hampshire? Because it's considered to be a slightly more moderate state, certainly compared to Iowa, the first state which went into caucuses. She's thrown in a lot of money. Some big name super PACs are backing her. Why is she staking so much on this one state?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, New Hampshire is important in the nominating process, even though compared to the rest of the country, it's not necessarily representative of other parts of the country. But this is a race that historically attracts a lot of attention. And the state of New Hampshire takes great pride in being the first primary state and really kicking off this process. So that's the reason why Nikki Haley, or frankly any other candidate in the race, would have devoted a lot of resources. There is another big component to consider as to why Nikki Haley has devoted so much time and resources to New Hampshire, and that is undeclared voters. That's the way the system for voting is set up here in the state. And what that means is that if you're a voter that's not registered with either one of the parties, either Republican Party or the Democratic Party, you can cast your vote for either candidate depending on who you want to support. So that means that she can appeal to a wide swath of people who may not necessarily vote Republican or even some Democrats that are not willing to support Joe Biden. So that is key, and that has been a central part of her campaigning effort here in the state, appealing to undeclared voters. They make up about 40% of the electorate here, so it's a lot of people. The majority of voters here in New Hampshire are actually undeclared. So that's why she has spent so much time and so much resources hoping to make that case.
And Gloria, on the other side, for Donald Trump, of course, he won Iowa in a big fashion, getting more than 50% of the vote. He also, after Iowa happened, managed to get some significant endorsements, including from the likes of Vivek Ramaswamy and more recently Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who bowed out of the race over the weekend. How may that change the course of this New Hampshire primary, if at all, the fact that Trump has managed to get the endorsements of some of his former contestants?
Well, the Trump campaign is certainly trying to send a message to voters that the Republican Party is coalescing behind him, right? You mentioned Vivek Ramaswamy. He was at a rally supporting Trump last night alongside other former challengers. Tim Scott was there, the senator for South Carolina, and so was Doug Burgum, the governor, who also endorsed him. And as you said, Ron DeSantis DeSantis, who initially had entered the race as the biggest threat to Trump, not only dropped out of the race, but also endorsed him. The two have not appeared together yet, but it is very significant that all these challengers are dropping out and immediately endorsing him. He is trying to make the argument that he is basically the only person left in this race and that the race is essentially over, not just here in New Hampshire, but really in the remainder of the nominating process. As I said, we're still very early in the primary process, the nominating process here in the United States. So he is trying to make the case that he's the candidate that Republicans are willing to support. And the polls suggest that some voters are agreeing with him. Now, we shouldn't focus entirely on the polls because sometimes voters do things differently, or the results look a lot different than what the polls were forecasting. But he is just trying to convince voters that there should be a rematch between him and President Joe Biden, and pushing his Make America Great Again agenda, as he calls it, and promising to bring back much of the policies and agenda items that he tried to put in place while he was president, after he became president in 2016.
And finally, Gloria, the two campaigns so far, and like you said, the field is whittled down to just two candidates. It's Nikki Haley and Donald Trump. And the picture's been quite contrasting in the manner in which they've been campaigning. She's, of course, been out there attending event after event. Mr. Trump has largely, stayed away from the campaign. He's had much fewer events compared to Nikki Haley. He wants to wrap this up as quickly as possible. And I guess her attempt is to try and stretch this for as long as she can, because after this, the next state is South Carolina, which is a home state where I guess if you're an incumbent from there, if you're a resident from there, you're a former governor from there, you would fancy your chances. Just walk us through, what's the way forward after New Hampshire, depending on what the result is tonight.
Yeah, you're exactly right about the way Trump has approached campaigning, not just here in New Hampshire, but really also in Iowa so far. Remember, Trump is still facing 91 charges, and he's got 4 different cases and trials against him. So he's been spending a lot of time back in New York City attending court, and has been flying back and forth, usually to host 1 or 2 campaign events. He hosted 1 campaign event here last night. You compare that with Nikki Haley, who has been crisscrossing the state, trying to go to as many events, meet as many voters as possible, and make her case. That's what voters here appreciate. They like that candidates make the time to meet them one-on-one, whether it's at a big event or a small event, a big rally, or just a coffee shop or a diner where they might be having a meal. That's what the process here is supposed to be all about. Now, you ask about what's next in the process. New Hampshire will get its results tonight, and then it's on to Nevada. But candidates have not been focusing all that much attention in that state. They have been focusing on South Carolina. That is also where Democrats will hold their first primary. Remember, Joe Biden is not listed in the ballot here in New Hampshire, although this is the first primary state. The Democratic Party choosing to have South Carolina as its first primary state because South Carolina is more representative of the Democratic Party, is what the Democratic Party feels. So the attention, the effort, the resources will certainly be placed there. And as you said, this is Nikki Haley's state, so even more reason for her to have a strong performance tonight. And if she doesn't win here in New Hampshire, it's going to be hard for her to argue that she should go on to South Carolina. The last thing I'll say about South Carolina is that Trump has already been endorsed by several Republicans there, despite the fact that this is Nikki Haley's home state. So it does look like even if she's able to go on to South Carolina, she might have an uphill battle there as well.
From Manchester, New Hampshire, thank you very much for joining us on CNN News 18.